US President Donald Trump has set a clear condition for Kyiv. He says he will see what Ukraine is doing with Tomahawk missiles before deciding to supply them. This marks Trump's tougher stance towards his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. If Ukraine receives Tomahawk missiles, up to 2,000 Russian military and industrial sites will fall within their range. This includes the Shahed drone production facility in Yelabuga and the strategic bomber airbase in Angols. Here's a report.
Two leaders, two conditions, and one weapon at the heart of a global flashpoint. A showdown is brewing over supply of the long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. US President Donald Trump is keeping up the suspense while putting America's arsenal on the bargaining table. He wants to know what Zelensky plans to do with the missiles before he supplies them.
Yeah, I've sort of made a decision, pretty much, if you consider. Yeah, I think I want to find out what they're doing with them.
Yes.
You know, where are they sending them, I guess? I'd have to ask that question. That war should never have started, would have never started.
Tomahawks, a key part of the US arsenal, are subsonic cruise missiles with deep strike capabilities. They can hit targets 1,250 kilometers to 2,500 kilometers away. Launched from ships, submarines or ground launchers, they carry high explosive warheads designed to penetrate hardened targets like military bunkers. Tomahawks are fast. They avoid radar detection by flying at high subsonic speeds while maintaining low altitudes. Zelensky had requested Trump for Tomahawk missiles when he met US President Donald Trump in New York on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. Kyiv claims the Tomahawks will give it the ability to carry out precision strikes and hit crucial targets deep inside Russia ahead of the winter. A move Ukraine believes will give it an upper hand, deter Putin and get him to the negotiating table on better terms. Kyiv currently relies on Western-supplied Army tactical missile systems and Storm Shadow missiles, which have a range of 300 kilometers, far shorter than the Tomahawks. Moreover, both the missile systems carry limited explosives during strikes. Ukraine has developed its own drone missile system to sidestep its allies' restrictions on the use of their weapons. In August, Ukraine unveiled the Flamingo, a ground-launched cruise missile. It claims can target locations up to 3,000 kilometers, although it's unclear if it has actually launched any. Russia perceives Western support for Ukraine as a potential threat of force. Despite Moscow's veiled threats, Western countries have continued to back Ukraine with humanitarian and military aid. But with Ukraine hammering Russia's energy infrastructure amid stalled peace talks, Putin has drawn a red line for Trump.
There were issues raised, such as discussions about supply of new weapon systems, including long-range and high-precision systems like Tomahawks. I have already said that this will lead to the destruction of our relations, or at least the positive trends that have emerged in these relations.
For now, the Tomahawks remain in storage. Russia and Ukraine await clarity from the US as Trump weighs his next move in a war that's testing the world's patience. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis is joining us from Starling, Virginia. He's a military expert and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Colonel Davis, good to see you. Let's put the Tomahawk aside for a moment. Ukraine is already using long-range missiles to strike deep into Russian territories. Has that not escalated or even pushed the war further?
It has advanced the Ukraine's ability to strike, but it has not changed the dynamic of the power imbalance on Russia's favor. It is not affecting the front lines of the war. It is causing Russia at most discomfort and annoyance, but it doesn't change anything. And you don't have to look very hard to figure out why that is. For example, I think it was overnight there were 275 drones fired from Ukraine into Russia to try and hit a number of facilities. Apparently a handful got through, but most were shot down, 275. But then you have Russia on a routine and a regular basis now having between 600 and 800 air missiles flying through with Garand-2s, Kinzhal missiles, supersonics, hypersonics, all kinds of different air assets. And you see that they're striking literally all over the entire small country, relatively, of Ukraine. And that is not knocking Ukraine out of the war. It is impacting their ability to operate at the front line. It is limiting them, but it is not stopping them. So you can just imagine the much, much geographically larger Russia, where things are spread out over larger periods of time. They have more air defense. That these much smaller number of drones and missiles going through are simply not going to even match what the Russian side is doing. And if you can see that that doesn't knock out the Ukraine side, which is because of its smaller size, it's easier to concentrate the strikes than with a much larger Russian. There's no path that's going to actually change anything. If anything, you might kick the hornet's nest, so to speak, and make them more angry, but you're not going to change anything at the front line. And why risk potentially escalating the war by adding something in that, by the way, you said we'll talk about the cruise missile in a minute. That can only be operated by American forces, not Ukrainian forces, and that's why you have the risk of escalating the war if that's brought into play.
Let's extend on that point, because Trump says he would want to know Ukraine's plans for Tomahawk missiles. He would also want to send the Tomahawk missiles to NATO countries or NATO before they're sent to Ukraine. How will that change the dynamics of this whole war?
Yeah, it won't change the military balance. It won't. It just simply is not going to. There's not that many of them, number one. Our production rate is very slow, so why would we want to get into a sustained bombing campaign using these things just on the surface of it? Because that would draw down our own supplies, and we couldn't replace them if we needed them. So that's the kind of the first point. The second one is that Russia does recognize this as an escalation, because these things have to be fired by either what's called the system on the ground, a ground launch that only we have, ballistic missile carriers, the bombers, the air bombers, or our ballistic missile carrier submarines. So only American vessels or aircraft or ground launch facilities can launch these things. It can't be just handed over to the Ukraine side. So if Russia sees a Tomahawk missile coming into its country, they know that it was directly fired by American military personnel, intelligence driven for the targeting the whole system. So that would require us to physically enter the war on behalf of Ukraine. And why would we want to risk that? That Russia would respond in some way. So that's different than giving them an ATACMS, for example, or a HIMARS carrier, which then, at least in part, they can navigate to. But this one it would have to be virtually entirely in the U.S., and that is a big difference in between the two.
All right. Colonel Davis, it's good to see you, as always. Thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you very much.